Okay, Dan, so we're on item 7, which is hydrogen fuel transportation workshop. And Dan, you're going to give us an overview, and then you've got four speakers waiting in the queue, I hope.
Yeah, we're going to spend a little more time on this. This will be a little bit different. We're going to have a lot of private sector speakers to talk about hydrogen fuel cells. I gave you all a homework assignment. I don't know if you had time to look at a quick video that kind of does hydrogen fuel cell 101 that helps explain the technology a little bit better. But it really is time to start considering this for our region. As I get into this, I was by no means an expert a few months ago and still am not, but I've been talking to a lot of people and learning a lot. And I feel pretty strong that this is a very good opportunity, not just for transportation, but for our local economy. And hopefully by the time you hear these presentations, you will see what I am seeing. But whether you measure it by what's going on in the stock market or science or government grants or what is even happening on the ground in construction, what's happening already in companies coming to the region, inquiring about land, the hydrogen economy is coming, and it's coming faster than people think. And I think we're in a real advantageous position to develop this hydrogen economy. Most of that is based on a lot of things that I lay out in the staff report. We're well equipped to produce hydrogen fuel. You don't have to have a pipeline. You don't have to import oil. Hydrogen's readily available. It has a ton of uses, but the heavy truck traffic and the strategic location in Shasta County to connect the urban areas to our south and to our north in Oregon and Washington and even British Columbia make it such that that alone could create a huge needs. But there's so many uses for hydrogen and hydrogen fuel cells. The fuel cell is a technology rather than burning the hydrogen is converted into electricity, and then that battery electricity runs different things. And it's kind of a common currency of energy. You can get from heavy trucks, or looking at shipping now, even aviation, cars, buses, but especially these heavy duty applications. It's really, I think, going to be one of the sources for the future, because pure battery electric power can only get you so far because of the sheer weight of the battery storage that's needed versus the hydrogen that then instead feeds the battery and charges the battery. Even now, you can buy little $100 units that charge your cell phone with hydrogen fuel cell power. The torch that's running around Tokyo right now and being passed around, that torch is hydrogen power. So, and backup power, there's really a lot of different applications for this beyond transportation. So the way I phrase it is, I really see this region as sitting on a modern day oil deposit that can be really fruitful for our economy and for other needs. And it just needs to be developed like anything else. And so at the end, I'll be presenting kind of a wrap up, but I have some very good speakers for you. I'll introduce them one at a time. It's going to start at a very high level. I've asked the speakers to go about 5 minutes each. We'll start at a very high level with about the technology and how it's used, and then kind of work our way down to the Shasta region, wrapping it up with Todd Jones, the president of the Economic Development Corporation. But Michael, if you could start, if you haven't already, elevating all of our panelists. We'll get them all up here, and then they can all be available for questions as they go. But the first is Keith Malone. He's from the California Fuel Cell Partnership. I'll let him explain better what that is, but it's really a consortium of mostly private and also public interest with a mission to develop fuel cells in California and beyond. And with that, I will turn it over to Keith to talk. Thank you, Keith, for coming.
And thank you for having me here. Good afternoon, everyone. Keith Malone with the California Fuel Cell Partnership. I am the team lead on communications and public affairs. I've got a lot of slides to share with you. Some of them I'm going to go through very quickly. And I know you're probably going to be like, wait, let's go back and look at it. I'm happy to follow up after this meeting individually with staff and or board members to talk about the fuller slide deck. Dan gave me a couple of questions he'd like to see me answer. And Dan, if you aren't hearing me answering them, you're more than welcome to poke me in the neck and get my attention on it. So let me see if I can share the screen. And here we go. And here we go. So just let me know if you're having trouble seeing the slideshow at all.
We see it well.
Good. I'm going to turn on the full slideshow. Here we go. So the California Fuel Cell Partnership, we've been around for about 20 years now. We are a partnership of government agencies, private industry, transit agencies, and academia. And we keep everyone focused. When we first started out, this was all still a science experiment. So it was focused on getting the technology moving along. Now we tend to focus more on moving all the related technologies, fuel cell electric vehicles, hydrogen fueling infrastructure, and hydrogen production further down the commercial pathway. And I want to point out our membership because about half of our membership works both zero emission pathways, both battery electric and fuel cell electric. So embedded within our organizational DNA is the belief that you cannot get to that zero emission future unless you have both. And I'd like to call out a few of them. If you look at the California side of our membership, it tends to be the government, the academic, as well as the transit agencies. And the other members, really the private industry members, tend to be really internationally focused. We have members that are fairly well known within the hydrogen sector: Shell, Toyota, Hyundai, and Honda. And we have some others that might surprise you. Ford, for example, just came back into the partnership after being away for a number of years. Nissan is a member. GM is a member. We just welcomed into the fold Daimler Trucks North America. And we have others in the heavy duty realm, including Nikola Motors. Certainly Hyundai and Toyota are in the heavy duty realm. Cummins joined our membership about a year and a half ago. And so we keep everyone talking, focused, and working together. And that is probably one of our underrated attributes as an organization. And so that's where we become a key resource to our members, and not just our members, but others outside of our membership, including your agency. So we can be of assistance and help you as you further explore the hydrogen and fuel cell pathway. On our website, we keep track of the number of vehicles and buses and hydrogen stations that are open.
Keith, can I interrupt you? I don't know
Sure.
if you mean to do this, but your presentation has the notes view and a next slide view instead of the full slide that you're talking about. So I'm just wondering if you could get the slide up there to make them easier to read.
Yeah, let me see what I can. I don't know why that's happening, and I apologize. And I am, you're going to be.
Hi, Keith. It's Wayne here. If you present again, I'll
Okay.
show you how to fix it.
Thank you.
Sure. On the top bar there, you see display settings with a down arrow.
Display settings. With
Very top.
There we go.
Yep.
Yep.
And then just swap that first one. Yep.
There we go.
There you go.
Apologies, everyone. Here we go. So we track buses, cars, trucks. Those are on the road here in California, the stations that are coming. A lot of resources available on our website, and I'm going to move through pretty fast. Our membership working together has developed strategy documents. For example, how do we launch the light duty market? That came out, the California roadmap emerged in 2012. These are some of the vehicles you see on the road today on the light duty side of the equation. More are coming, both cars and vans, a lot of announcements as of late. So for example, Stellantis, which is the merger of Fiat Chrysler and the PSA Group, which includes Peugeot, they announced they're bringing a van to market, and soon after that, a light duty vehicle. But I really wanted to focus more on the transit side of the equation because the fuel cell buses in California, we have about 20 years of experience, have really shown the value of this technology. So one of them is Sunlight Transit out in the Coachella Valley. And they really illustrate more than anything else the fact that fuel cell electric technology performs well in extreme temperature environments. So not just out in deserts, and we know, for example, not just Sunline, but Las Vegas Transit is acquiring fuel cell buses because they find they perform better in those extreme temperatures. But they also have been tested north of the Arctic Circle. And so you find agencies like SRTA in Ohio, which really loves this technology. AC Transit out of the East Bay, they've shown, remember, obviously with transit, you're moving people daily without interruption, and you need technology that works well. And they've been able to show more than any other agency the fact that fuel cell technology not only performs well, but it endures very well. In fact, one of their key stories that checks off a lot of boxes for a lot of agencies is they took one of their buses to Reno for the American Public Transportation Association conference. They went up and over the Donner Pass during a snow slurry. And really actually great story. Their COO, who started off as the assistant director of maintenance, was not very happy about fuel cell technology when he arrived. Changed his tune really quickly, and now their mechanics get trained on everything. So he wants everybody to accept the buses, and the buses go out no matter what kind of bus it is, it goes out. They can handle all the routes, or nearly all the routes. One of the other early adopters is Orange County Transportation Authority, 10 fuel cell buses at the moment, but their station will accommodate upwards of 50. And other transit agencies are following. North County Transit District in North San Diego County, as well as Golden Empire and Bakersfield, have all put out RFPs for hydrogen fueling stations. I've also included a clip about SRTA, which is based out of Ohio. And the fuel cell buses have really paved the way for the trucking sector. And we're now in kind of the earliest stages. And it's not about proving the technology, it's about getting kind of things set and ready and tweaked. And we're already in the process across the state of building 3 hydrogen stations, and there's about 6 to 7 more that have been announced or in the planning stages. And in addition to that, we also have two rail projects that will be coming to market. And down below, you can see Caltrans as a street sweeper that is has fuel cell technology. But there's a lot of good news about the technology, about the durability, about the availability numbers. NREL, they have staff that have been tracking fuel cell buses for about the last 15 years, about 15 years of good federally collected data. Lots of good signs. The OEMs like New Flyer and Eldorado National, now known as ENC, are taking leadership roles in a way that they never have. There are also some challenges as well, but as my colleagues that will follow me from Toyota and Shell will show, there's a lot of good news as well when it comes to infrastructure costs. As I end my really quick presentation, and believe me, I can talk for hours about this stuff. I'm easily triggered. What was I going to say? There's a lot to be shared and there's a lot to be learned. But on the transit side of the equation, this is one of the sectors that has really proven itself. And that if you pursue this pathway, you have a lot of interested parties. Reading is a really kind of key geographic area in California, because not only for trucking, not only for your agency potentially, but Reading, a station there that also includes light duty, forces a conversation now with Oregon and Washington and even British Columbia. We're already talking to our colleagues.
Keith, this is
Great.
Chair Watka. I'd just like to ask one question. I don't
Sure.
fully understand. Are these total just fuel cell, or are they a hybrid electric battery vehicle and fuel cell combined?
So for the most part, when you're dealing with a fuel cell electric vehicle, in a sense, it really is a hybrid. So you have, in most cases, the fuel cells are the dominant system, but there are batteries on board that serve I'll call it a helper role that captures excess energy from the regenerative braking systems in the fuel cells, and it helps even out the flow of energy to the fuel cell stack.
Then would the batteries be charged at night with electricity, or would they simply be charged from the fuel cell?
Simply be charged during the operation of the vehicle.
Okay.
And I will add one other great attribute about fuel cell electric vehicles is that whether it's a car, a bus, or a truck, the fueling operations mimic what you already have. So in terms of behavior changes, not a lot of behavior changes are required for the agency and for the staff. Certainly it's new technology, but it's a fueling experience that's fairly recognizable to everyone.
Question for you, Dan. Are all 4 members going to stay on for questions at the end, or should we ask the board members ask as we go along?
I was going to ask your preference, Mr. Chairman. We could do it either way.
Well, I'd say if anybody has any questions for Keith, we ought to ask him right now, but he ought to stay till the end also.
Sure.
So any board member have any additional questions for Keith? Okay, so Dan, let's introduce your next speaker. You're muted.
That camera comes right on cue. So our next speakers are from Shell New Energies, Shell Oil Company, and Wayne Leidy, who we've spoken to before. And Tom, sorry if I mispronounce your name, Morris, and he is also with Shell. And this is more to talk about what they're working on, but also the fuel dispensing side of it and what it looks like to manufacture the hydrogen fuel and dispense it. So with that, go ahead, Wayne, if you're starting. Thank you for coming.
Great. Thank you, Dan. And hi, everyone. Great to be with you. My name is Wayne Leidy. I'm the commercial head at Shell Hydrogen for North America. We sit here north of San Francisco, and so great to be talking with you today. I'll share my screen as well and use a few slides just as an aid while we go through this. Okay, so my first slide is the most important. It says, please don't make investment decisions based on what I say to you today. As we develop hydrogen fuel, we think of it, as Keith said, as being very familiar. The value proposition is essentially the same as gasoline and diesel. Drive your vehicle, whether it's a private vehicle that you own or a commercial fleet that you're operating, and do the refueling in much the same way as gasoline or diesel. A point of comparison, the opening discussion around public fast chargers provides a kind of nice comparison. A public fast charger, DC fast charger, might be 50 to something like 350 kilowatts power as a rate of energy transfer. A hydrogen fueling station is about 3,000 kilowatts. And so it's somewhere between 10 and 60 times the level of service in terms of providing a customer a fast fueling experience. Or said another way, something like 10 to 60 times the number of vehicles that could be supported through a fueling station as compared to a charging station. Hydrogen is tremendously flexible in how we produce it. It's ubiquitous, but it needs to be produced. We need to separate the hydrogen from some other element, oxygen in water or carbon in various feedstocks. All of these pathways can be decarbonized and can be from renewable resources. So as we think about developing hydrogen in the portfolio of products that we sell, we are focused on renewable and decarbonized hydrogen, part of the energy transition that Shell is trying to make, and in line with the energy transitions that society is trying to make and policy is calling for. So in addition to being a zero emission and electrified vehicle, we're working towards a zero carbon and renewable sourced hydrogen. And as has been mentioned, this diversity of production pathways enables sort of the right approach in each location. So as we think about Northern California generally, we can think about the kinds of resources and feedstocks and therefore pathways for producing hydrogen in the region that would be most advantageous. Of course, we're an energy company, and so we think about energy systems. Hydrogen as a decarbonized molecule starts to be able to couple sectors of the energy system and the economy. So most of what we've talked about is what we call hydrogen mobility, fuel into transportation applications. Hydrogen also is an important industrial feedstock into everything from producing ammonia fertilizers to refining oil and chemicals and producing steel. And also it can link to other parts of the energy system, the electricity grid, the natural gas grid as well. So as we develop hydrogen, it's also becomes important for the reliable and resilient energy systems for California. At Shell, we're developing the full range of what we call new fuels, fuels other than gasoline and diesel. What that means is we're quite objective, kind of like Keith mentioned for several of the members of the fuel cell partnership. My job is to make hydrogen as good as it can possibly be because it competes at our vice president level with biofuels and with charging of battery electric vehicles and with gas to liquids technologies, essentially. And so what that means also is that we're quite objective in where hydrogen we see has a strong use case, a strong customer segment, a strong value proposition, strong commercial routes to market, and where some of the other new fuels work better. This just gives you a sense of our current scope. This is a slide that's hard to keep updated with all of what we're doing. It illustrates that our activity is global. And I might point to a few things in particular on this slide. In North America, you can see most of our activity is in California, 2 refueling stations up in Vancouver. Most of the activity has been in building out the open retail fueling stations for passenger vehicles, light duty vehicles. We're now in a program of building out 50 more in California. So a constant pace of opening new hydrogen stations and constant pace of selecting which sites to implement hydrogen at. It's the evolving fueling network and trying to be responsive to where the next most urgent gap in fueling is. The red truck icons you see are those first heavy-duty truck fueling stations. The first 3 are about to open in Southern California, serving the drayage trucks that move freight from the ports of LA and Long Beach. That was a first-generation kind of refueling station for us. We've just begun the next generation in West Sacramento. That's a station that will serve car and trucks and also fuel the first freight locomotive. So it gives you a sense of the pace of development. Every few years, we seem to be developing double or triple the capacity at half the cost and opening up a new segment of fueling performance. A lot of good work from a team of more than 100 people here to deliver that kind of thing. And then a few other things just to notice, the hydrogen production facilities getting started, electrolysis and thermochemical conversions of different hydrocarbon feedstocks. And over on the right-hand side, the very early days of a global market. So a liquid hydrogen ship now in sea trials, large-scale liquefaction, some of the early steps that led to a liquefied natural gas market are now starting to happen by Shell and by others for hydrogen. This is a picture of our next fueling station, the dispenser design there, and as I mentioned, a program of continuous development that helps us to double the performance of that fueling station while cutting the cost in half. Importantly, also, it's meant to bring some confidence to the market. We do have the chicken or egg challenge. Which comes first? Customers who are confident in buying the vehicles, or infrastructure that customers vehicles? And so we try to coordinate that and give confidence to everyone to launch the markets. This is a picture of the Toyota Kenworth hydrogen fuel cell truck that will begin fueling at those first 3 stations out of the ports of LA and Long Beach. This is a picture of the 10 megawatt electrolyzer that we are midway through constructing in Germany. Gives you a sense of what that kind of facility looks like. And this is a picture of the intention. We're in feasibility studies for several hundred watt offshore wind and electrolysis in the Netherlands. So it also gives a sense of how fast scale is increasing. The largest of whatever it is seems to be changing every few months. 10 megawatt electrolyzer is the largest when it opens, and yet already we're talking hundreds of megawatts. That's it from me. I look forward to your questions now or at the end. Thank you.
Do any board members have a question here for Wayne?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I could, I did have a question that even I didn't ask earlier. Wayne, what is the cost of that, like that 10 megawatt facility or what have you? I'm just trying to give the board members an idea that if there was a facility coming to this area, facilities like you're building in California, where you manufacture the hydrogen and can dispense it, is that a $10 million project or a $100 million project?
Yeah, the kind of private sector investment that would come to the region, the kind of capital that Shell or others would invest depends a bit on what is built. A lot of information on cost is available because a lot of the infrastructure has been built with some funding subsidy, grant funding from the California Energy Commission. So I'll reply to you with some of that public information. You would see that a smaller retail hydrogen fueling station might cost somewhere between $2 to $4 million total capital, and that a larger either multimodal like we're building in West Sacramento now, or larger truck kind of station might be $6 to $9 million. A hydrogen production facility, it really depends on how large it is, but might range from $20 million. And an example, an Air Liquide production facility being built now in Las Vegas, they have quoted $200 million.
Wayne, I would ask you a question then, just back to the basic. I'm familiar with like liquid propane vehicles that took their gas engine and ran on liquid propane. So there you go to a pressurized tank, you quickly fill it. So if I go in with a hydrogen tank, is that under a similar pressure? And do I fill in like 5 minutes?
Yeah, that's right. On board the vehicle, it is a pressurized gas. So what the refueling station is doing is pushing that gas onto the vehicle. The coupling is very user-friendly, but it's the reverse of a liquid fuel. So the male end of it is on board the vehicle, and the female end is the nozzle that makes a tight coupling. Early days, when we got started in this, late 90s, there was a person with full protective equipment, certified to do the fueling. These days, you can go buy a car, decline all the training, come to the Shell station, swipe your credit card, and fuel. No training needed. As you stand there listening to your car fueling, you'll hear periodic pulsing of the gas. And what's happening is a bit of communication between the vehicle and the station, verifying. We're trying to push that gas onto your vehicle as fast as we can, but not over pressure or over temperature the tank. So that's what's happening. And then, yeah, to fuel a car with roughly 5 kilograms will take somewhere between 3 to 4 minutes, very similar to gasoline. To fuel a bus with maybe 30 or 40 kilograms, or a truck with up to 70 kilograms in, say, 10 or 15 minutes, similar to diesel, requires a much higher flow rate. And that's what we've just finished developing. So that next fueling station in West Sacramento implements the high flow components so that the fueling performance up to 70 kilograms is similar time to diesel. And then that station will fuel the locomotive with about 200 kilograms.
Wow.
Gives you a sense of kind of our basic challenge has been how to push that gas on faster.
Do any other board members have a question for Wayne?
Yeah, I do. This is Mark Mazzano. It's my understanding that the cost of the fuel to the consumer at present is right around $16. I guess you could call it, if you compare it to a gallon of gas, which is in the $4 range today. Yeah. Now, based on the mileage that you get out of it, I think that brings it down to about $6 a gallon, which is still pretty high for what we're used to. I mean, they're used to that in Europe, but here we're not. And the hydrogen powered vehicles, it's also my understanding those are currently running around 60,000, more than a Tesla, the Tesla 3, I think. So what's the likelihood that the cost, I mean, yeah, you're talking about a lot of money to put the station here in Reading, but what's the likelihood of getting the unit cost down?
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. We're in hydrogen. We are about a decade behind battery electric vehicles in introducing the vehicles and the fuel to the market, and then scaling up. We're following a similar trajectory about 10 years, getting started about 10 years later. The kind of cost reduction curves are similar as well as we have seen in batteries. The fundamentals are there: economies of scale in the manufacturing, economies of scale in the components, etc. For the fuel, about half of the cost has been in the refueling station itself. So that was job number one for us. The other half is in the hydrogen supply chain. Over the last 6 years, we've doubled the capacity of the refueling station while cutting its cost in half twice.
Oh,
And so just, the product that we're just now starting to build can get us to the gasoline and diesel cost parity that you mentioned. The asterisk on that is, but it still depends on utilization. We still deploy a lot of capital to build it, so it's hard to price the hydrogen at parity until that utilization goes up. And that's usually what some kind of public funding bridges. When we think about the fuel cost to the customer, just rough math here, indeed, the retail price of hydrogen in California today is somewhere between $13 and $16 per kilogram.
right.
And you can roughly cut that in half to get an equivalent dollars per gallon. So $16 per kilogram would be like $8 per gallon. So it's roughly double the cost of gasoline today. Compare that to fast charging. Look around for the full cost of charging. The Tesla supercharger network is kind of the best proxy that's out there. That'll be about 34 cents per kilowatt hour below 60 kilowatts rate of charge, and double that, 68 cents a kilowatt hour above, which is usually something like a 250 kilowatt charge. So again, we're about 3,000 kilowatt level of service. Compare it to a 250 kilowatt fast charge, and hydrogen at $15 a kilogram is the same, is about 72 cents per kilowatt hour. So if the level of service desired is fast charging, hydrogen will give you 10 times the rate at about the same cost today.
Okay.
But again, we're trying to cut that down to gasoline parity and then cut it down further. The quick thing on the vehicles is essentially the same thing. And James from Toyota can probably speak more eloquently than I on how they're reducing the cost of the vehicles.
Okay, anybody else have a question for Wayne before we go on?
Yeah, Greg, I had a couple questions. When you had the slide up that said something about biofuels, what was I looking at? There was something green there. What kind of fuels were those? There it is.
That's a picture from Brazil. We have a joint venture called Ryzen, which is sugarcane ethanol. So you're looking at a sugarcane field being harvested.
Okay. I was just really curious. And then when you talk about biofuels, do you have any ability to use timber for this, or is that just not a possibility? Because, you know, in California, we have a lot of dead or dying trees.
Yeah.
And it only makes sense to me that we could utilize some of this material for these purposes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, the diversity in how we produce hydrogen is one of its strengths. This middle column on this slide called gasification is also sometimes called thermochemical conversion. There's a whole range of specific technologies underneath that, pyrolysis and other, but essentially you're dissociating the molecules. So you can take a carbonaceous feedstock. It could be trash bags that are destined for the landfill. It could be forestry waste coming out of the forests. You can put it in high temperature, oxygen starved environment, and those molecules dissociate, split apart, and make a syngas composition of hydrogen, carbon monoxide, other things. And then you process that syngas, we can pull off the hydrogen and the carbon comes out as a solid. And that carbon can be used to make carbon fiber composites or fertilizer back into soil. But the point is that's not going to the atmosphere. So that, you know, middle line there is quite exciting.
Mm-hmm.
The technology is just being commercialized. It's technically ready, but commercially it's just getting to kind of the pilot scale. And then it becomes, like any biofuel, really about the logistics of that feedstock. And so I don't know well enough, you know, how forestry management and wastes coming out of the forest would be managed effectively.
Yeah, the logistics look to me like probably your biggest kind of obstacle. And then one last question, you know, I would think that, you know, agricultural users might be interested in this kind of option, because I would think, you know, they don't generally quote leave the farm they're not too far away. So if they had a, you know, a stationary place they can refuel and everything, it might be a good application. So I just thought I'd mention that. I don't know if you've explored that at all, but might be a good opportunity to think about.
Yeah, thanks. I would just say, as we think about fueling with hydrogen, the same approaches as you see out there in the world for fueling with gasoline and diesel essentially make sense because it's so similar. So you could envision a kind of open retail fueling network accessible to everyone, and also perhaps some private depot fueling at the transit agency, fueling at the Amazon distribution center or whatever it is.
Thank you.
Dan, maybe we should go to the next speaker, and then if we have questions, we'll ask them at the end.
Yes, I'd be glad to. So the next speaker is from Toyota, and that is James Cass, and he's going to talk more about the vehicle applications. But as you'll learn and have seen, Toyota is more than just automobiles or small cars. It's also heavy equipment and buses. So with that, I will turn it over to James. Thanks for attending, James.
Of course, Dan. Just making sure you can hear me okay and see the full screen.
Yes.
Excellent. So thanks for the quick opportunity here. I'll just give a really brief overview, mostly on the mobility side of how we can utilize fuel cells for everything from light duty to heavy duty even as well. So my role is a business development manager, focused mostly on everything zero emission vehicles at Toyota, but specifically on hydrogen. So that of course is the focus for today's discussion. If I can get the slide here to move, there we go. So I guess the first question, where has hydrogen gone within Toyota? And it certainly was not something that started just a couple years ago, but really was a 30-year almost development now, starting in the early 90s, actually the same time as the Prius development. And you can see it's many different vehicles and generations and retrofits to finally get us to where we were just 5 years ago when we launched the first retail vehicle, the Mirai, which has already been discussed a few different points here. But just to show you kind of what we're looking at, is the first vehicle on the right, which we unveiled in 2015. We had a global production capacity about 3,000 of those per year. And just kind of as Wayne mentioned, as far as kind of the stepwise change as you keep introducing new technology, in the current generation now we just started selling here in early 2021, was now at stepwise change by 10-fold production capacity, going to 30,000 vehicles per year. And of course, you see it's also a lot nicer to look at, that vehicle there on the left. A lot of good design improvements and improvements to cost reduction, to performance. And it really is actually one of the better driving Toyotas that are on the vehicle today when you talk to any folks that have these vehicles right now. Just wanted to kind of note that and share the light duty experience because it's very relevant to everything else Toyota does in fuel cells, namely in the heavy duty space, which I'll flip to go ahead next for focus. And here, again, we're looking at truck platforms, but it's not a dedicated Toyota truck platform. We started from scratch, but working with existing partners. And in this case, you see all of these are Kenworth trucks. So working with additional Class 8 truck OEMs to integrate into their existing vehicles, but using our powertrain technology and fuel cell technology in them. So actually the first two trucks there, the blue truck and the red truck, leverage literally the exact same fuel cell stack in the car. And in those particular examples, we actually disassembled vehicles and grabbed as many of the components as we possibly could and created kind of these Franken truck prototypes just a few years ago to just show that we could scale the technology from vehicles into something like the largest trucks that are on the road today. So what we're going to be doing now, and actually just starting even within the last couple of weeks, is rolling out the first 10 trucks that will be going to actual existing customers here. So we'll have 4 different operators, including UPS, a couple local drayage operators, and our own internal fleet that'll be delivering Mirai and other vehicles throughout the region in LA. We'll actually be going into customers' hands for a 1-year demonstration supported by the California government. And of course, part of that is the fueling, which Wayne already spoke to. So this particular grant is supporting 2 of those stations. There's a 3rd one going as well in the port, and building off of 2 existing stations that we have today to support initial prototypes. So where we're going from here, those were based on the previous generation technology, but we've now actually started developing with the newest generation stacks, improved in all respects of performance and cost reduction. So this is kind of that first Kenworth truck that you see again going into a production intent vehicle, as what we announced here. So now going from just this prototype proof of concept into actual real demonstrations and production intent type platforms for these Class 8 trucks. We're also working with the Hino Truck Company. So it's a Toyota subsidiary also going into the Class 8 market because we can be flexible in working with multiple partners. Since we're not just doing a ground up platform, we have the ability to work with any of these Class 8 truck OEMs that are developing fuel cell vehicles and fuel cell products. So note that Toyota is not the only one doing this. There's actually just about all the main heavy hitters here in the States have some kind of fuel cell development program to noting that it needs to be part of the solution for getting these Class 8 trucks to a decarbonized and zero emission solution. I do also want to say that it doesn't stop at cars or trucks. There's also everything in between and larger. So here you see a couple of examples that have already existing today, whether that's from buses and medium duty trucks. There's also using them for stationary power or backup power, as Dan alluded to before. But also think like forklifts. It was actually a very major success story here in the US, where I think there's in the tens of thousands of these actually in retail service at, for example, Walmart and Amazon warehouses today, because they have that uptime, that quick refueling, as opposed to things like battery swapping that maybe you have with those battery forklifts inside. Sorry, here we'll try to get rid of the distractions. And of course, now there's marine as well. So it's going even larger from trucks and going to marine, to rail, and these larger and larger applications because of the modularity that we can see with fuel cell technology. So my last quick slide here, I wanted to keep this fairly brief, is just the key focus on collaboration. So we've kind of alluded to this chicken and egg problem, and collaboration is what really helps solve that. So that's bringing all the key players in the room, starting with the government and local AHJs as well. So of course, a huge partnership with the Shasta Regional Group here when looking at building out in Reading or other areas, but all the key industry players as well. So we as the OEM and work with other automakers, other partners from the infrastructure side, the fueling side, and the end user side, because we all have to be speaking the same language and understand all of our goals to know when to build out stations where and how we can roll out vehicles to support them. So of course, I think Dan kind of mentioned this before, but the Reading and Shasta area is a really key area when you think of launching beyond California, and also a key freight hub within California. So you could have a localized light duty hub for vehicles or buses, but also enable that north-south corridor for heavy duty trucking to unlock states like Oregon and Washington and such. So certainly a lot of interest in unlocking that whole West Coast corridor, with you guys being right there in the northern part of the state. With that, I'll wrap up quick and see if there's any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you're there, but I have a question. If I could just jump in while we're waiting here. And James, maybe if you could stop sharing your screen, we can see each other better. And
let's do that.
And while you're doing that, my question was about the collaboration. I probably want to come back to Keith too, because he said poke him in the neck if he missed anything. And one thing I want to talk about is, you know, why collaborate at the regional level, at this local level? Because I think there might be a common aspect of thinking, why not just let the private sector, you know, and whatever happens, they compete. And, you know, is there any real value in us as local agencies in a region getting together to, you know, form a consortium or whatever that is with our economic development folks and our power companies to help this along? So, you know, what do you see? How important is that value of a local agency trying to facilitate this? How much attention do you pay to that before you invest? And I know Keith has something as well, and I see his mic's hot. So go ahead and start, Keith.
I can give you a good example. When we developed the strategy document for rolling out light duty stations in California, you know, we had everybody in the room except one of the key groups, and it was the local component. We had thought through everything. I think we come up with a really good foundational plan, and we didn't consider permitting and planning. I think had some of our newer members been there, like Shell, they would have brought with them experience from the development of stations. Sometimes you can't always know what everyone brings to the table. And so sometimes there's a serendipitous opportunity or a nature to bringing together all parties. And it could very well be that I mean, I can tell you every time we have gone into localities and when our station developers and our members go in, they learn more, they learn how to do it better, and they learn how to make sure that what we bring in is welcomed for any number of reasons, technical and otherwise. And so and also just for example, if we're going to bring in fueling infrastructure to the area, and because it would be considered both a remote station, perhaps a local station, but one of the key issues is throughput. And working together with local entities, perhaps we can make sure that we can build enough throughput to really support the station, not just for the truck traffic that might go through, not just for the transit agency, but there may be other opportunities as well. And I can't emphasize enough the role that Reading plays, not just for going north, but even going into the Redwood Coast. If you look at what goes on and talking to colleagues at the Redwood Coast Energy Authority, they've talked about the fact that in case of an earthquake, a fire, or a tsunami, they are effectively cut off. And so kind of their connections to Reading and other places are essentially key, and for them also to build their own resiliency. So I'll stop rambling and see if James or Wayne has anything else to add to that.
All good stuff, Keith. I think the only thing I would add is support in an area basically enables investment very quickly, because we've seen that barriers in an area means nothing gets built there. Nobody will go there because it's not worth the time, the effort, the additional time to make all that work. And honestly, if you look to the Northeast states, for example, it's a very different beast trying to permit something in the Northeast states. And we've been pushed back, I mean, literally years from wanting to do something in the Northeast states. And we still don't know when we'll be able to successfully launch there because of the locales and their permitting processes and the fire departments and such. So the support of a local region will basically determine where investment is made, because it can turn something into reality or something that just doesn't happen.
Keith, if I could ask a question, if we had a fueling station in Reading, could that truck, like the one pictured behind you, could it make it to Seattle without refueling from Reading to Seattle?
I'm going to let James answer that one.
Seattle's pretty far. Our current trucks right now, we say will go at least 300 miles, even fully loaded 80,000 pounds. I think recently some other trucks, even from Hyundai and some of their recent announcements, are maybe even 500 miles. So even our initial prototypes are going, a lot further than a lot of the battery trucks today. But you'd probably need another one called Portland to be able to get all the way to Seattle, get the network going.
Any other board members have any questions for any of the three?
This is Mark. I have a couple of questions. One, the internal combustion engine is the dinosaur that will leave us in the near future. And the competition seems to be between electric vehicles and hydrogen. And in my study of the electrical vehicle and talking to people from Tesla, they're already looking at different ways to build their batteries because of the elements that they need out of the earth are limited. And so in the production of, I read somewhere, I saw it in that video that you can create enough hydrogen off the manure from one cow for a year. Is that accurate?
I don't know that conversion from cow to car off the top of my head. But on the fuel side of things, that's right. That the feedstocks to produce hydrogen are plentiful and renewable, diverse, as we talked about, and that the equipment to do those conversions don't require, rare earth metals or other materials that are scarce.
Wayne, if we were going to go along that same line, in order to produce an $8 equivalent hydrogen, and if we were doing it locally here in Reading, how much could a facility pay per kilowatt hour for electricity to produce $8 hydrogen?
Again, it's a good question that's hard to give a snappy answer to. There are two things there are three things that are important to that answer. One is the capital cost of that electrolysis facility, and that cost is also coming down very rapidly. So it's kind of like solar panels, where the first question is, where is it, to get a sense of the sun? And the second question is, when do you want it? Because the price tomorrow is so much cheaper than the price today. So the capital cost of that electrolyzer is coming down rapidly. The second is the capacity factor. What percentage of the time is that electrolyzer producing hydrogen? And oftentimes it's a very small percentage of the time. If you're trying to produce from the sun, it's 30% of the time or something like that. If what you have in mind is making use of some of the hydro resource, co-locating at a dam, using some of the renewable electricity resource that you have up there, then that capacity factor can get much higher. It may still make sense to not use it 100% of the time. You still want that electrolyzer as something of a demand response asset to the grid. Don't produce hydrogen when that electricity is needed for other things. But the result of those two things would give an answer to, what's the power price. I'll say we've investigated with a couple different entities up there and found that the apparent power prices could probably work.
Okay, well, we do not have a surplus of hydro here. And, you know, from 5 to 8 p.m., there's a shortage of electricity everywhere in California. So about the only time it's cheap is from 10 to 3. So anyway, that'll all have to work out. Any other board members have a question for any of the three? Okay, well, this was great. I have
Mr.
one
Chairman,
more.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
just one more speaker, and it was last minute. I had Todd Jones come and just ask him to take just 2 minutes to kind
okay.
of bring it all home to the local level. I said we were starting out at a high level. As I talked to Todd, you know, we found out there's a lot of mutual interest between our organization and what he's working on. So I thought it would be great to hear from him.
Okay.
So Todd, if you would go ahead, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I'll keep it very, very brief. This was actually great for me to hear the different perspectives from Shell and Toyota and Keith as well. So just a really quick overview. I know most of you on this call, and some of you already know about what's happening in this area besides this conversation we just had today. But just since January, we've had about 6 companies look to expand to Shasta County to do hydrogen fuel manufacturing and fueling. And a lot of times it also ends up being DC fast charging as well. And you know, it is, like they've said, kind of a chicken and the egg. Some of these folks want to have some type of a fleet contract in place before they come. Other ones just want to build the infrastructure because we are in that strategic location. And those are kind of the 3 big factors that I see that come in kind of from a early, more novice perspective, that strategic locations, probably number 1, availability and cost of electricity, natural gas and water, all abundant in this area. We have those all here. And like everyone said, we're a really great location for this. So to connect with Dan just a couple of weeks ago about this topic, and then hearing from Keith and Wayne and James about what that potential is, there's a lot of opportunity that we can have from an economic development perspective with all of you at SRTA to land some of these deals, because I think we can fit a lot of these needs. And to Supervisor Rickard's comments as well, one of those companies has talked about utilizing biomass to, I don't want to go through the technology because I'll probably stumble on my words, but use biomass and convert that into hydrogen. And there's other folks like we have here locally, Moss Energy, who has dairy digesters all over the country now. They're injecting renewable natural gas from dairy farms into pipelines, and you could buy that gas on a credit basis here in Redding, even if it comes from Visalia, and they're in that market to sell that. And you could have renewable natural gas converted into hydrogen. And with all of the incentives and the regulatory environment with low carbon fuel standards and cap and trade, you kind of have the golden goose there of fuel that's created from renewable energy that they're trying to limit the emissions on, and then turning it into something with zero emissions. So there's a lot of synergies. I don't want to go into too much more detail now because the speakers have covered so much of this very, very well, but there's a lot of synergies. And I think the one last thing, since all of you are elected officials in your municipalities, is that zoning in planning is an issue. When I first brought this to one of the municipalities, you know, they don't really have a picture of how big the scale is. And these folks, again, they want to do manufacturing and fueling most of the time at the same spot. Some of them need as little as an acre. That's a semi-commercial place ready to go. And, you know, talking to fire marshals, there was some worry about heavy industrial, general industrial, what that looks like. So just a lot of education needs to happen. But if you see some of these in person, I think we're a community that's willing to make these opportunities happen, and it's going to benefit all of us. So anyway, I'll leave it at that, but I'm excited, and there is a lot of interest in the area.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, some have offered to share their contact information. I think we'll post that on our website of the speakers who are willing to share that, so that those listening in the audience can contact these folks. And just to put a bit of a lid on this, and I know that there's a couple people, it sounds like, that have raised their hands and want to speak from the public. Just next steps for us, we already have money budgeted in our overall work program to look at this. And, you know, there's a lot of moving parts with developing this. It's obviously requires a lot of disciplines that are beyond just transportation. And so working locally with people like Todd and REU, and then bringing in private sector expertise, we could form like a consortium of sorts. We also contract with the Center for Transportation and the Environment, and they have real experts in this field. And, you know, I think it just starts with a dialogue, and then we see where that goes and see where opportunities are. So like I say in the staff report, we're not saying where it's going to go in terms of that, but we're going to kind of play it out and see what happens, keep reporting to the board. And I want to emphasize too that it's not just Reading that's a key site. Shasta Lake may have resources and want to participate in this, City of Anderson, and so on. So thank you very much for doing this workshop with us.
Okay, Dan, then we'll open it up for public comment. Keith, do we have some people queued up?
We have Ed Merrick and Sunrise Reading would both like to speak.
Okay, you have 3 minutes to make your comment.
Who would you like me to promote first?
Whoever came on first.
Okay. Here comes Ed. Ed, please be sure to unmute your microphone.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I hadn't planned to comment on the subject, but I think briefly the best way to comment on it or to look at it is to simply look at the 2 grants your agency made for the 2018 grant, which was accepted, $8.5 million for 7 buses and the required charging infrastructure, which due to drop in prices for both since then, probably more than enough. And the grant you asked for that was turned down, if I remember correctly, and I haven't looked at this one as carefully, it was for $20 million to produce charging infrastructure and 1 or more buses. And the main reason being that the charging, the fueling infrastructure alone was $15 million. And if I also remember correctly, that was not to create that hydrogen, that was just to dispense it. So on top of that, you'd be paying the very high, much more than $6 a gallon equivalent cost for hydrogen. Those are my main points on that subject.
Okay,
Thank you.
And really, you'll have another chance when we get to item 12. Okay, the next public comment.
Hi there.
Yes, we hear you.
Thank you very much. It's just taking a second to get me going here. Hi, Dash Waterbury. Oh, I don't have, it's not giving me video yet. Here you go. Here's my beautiful face. Okay. Thank you, everybody. This is Dash Waterbury, coordinator for Sunrise Reading, climate activism group here in town. I was not able to be here for public comment in the beginning due to my work. So I wanted to voice that many of us in the environmental activism community, the people trying to address the climate emergency, are very, very excited as all of you must be about the possibilities within hydrogen and hydrogen fuel technology, and especially for the things they could do for our area. But we do want to voice that if we as a region begin to explore the production of hydrogen, we are going to have to start exploring making sure that that creation of hydrogen is done in a way that is reducing emissions. The entirety of this would become a circus act if the creation of this hydrogen was done in a way that's not sustainable. And in that case would make the use of hydrogen non-carbon emission friendly. So there are, as I'm sure many of you are aware, maybe all of you are aware, there are different gradations of how sustainable hydrogen production can be. There's what we call green hydrogen, has gotten the nickname green hydrogen, which is sustainable. And there is blue hydrogen, and we go down to gray and black. And so when we're starting to talk about these things, that it would be the forefront of importance, of utmost importance, to be exploring how to do this sustainably in the North State. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a good point you make. Do we have any other public comments on this item?
Not at this time.
Okay, we will move on to the next item.